Hello, hello. Welcome to the second edition Mechanic Roundup for 2019. I'm here with Richard Nee today. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Ross, how are you doing?
Doing all right. So we're here to talk about some mechanics from 2019, and I have a very spiffy PowerPoint presentation that I thought I was more prepared for, but I am not. So let me get this up and running. Yep, I'm going to have to fire my assistant for not being more prepared with this, but welcome to the Chewy Mechanics Survey Results Extravaganza. A few weeks ago, actually several months ago, I put out a survey just asking people what they thought of the mechanics that were released in 2019. Are they best of the best thing since sliced bread? Are they the worst thing since the square wheel? And I did this in 2017, going to do it in 2019, and hopefully we can do it going forward. Uh, so, ready to go?
Sure.
All right. Spiffy graphics.
Oh yeah. It's like this big transporter. That's great.
Yes. So this is where we were the last time we asked people about um, how things were ranking. Multi-affiliations were the bottom tier. Early game and late game were in the middle tier. So we're going to look at how the holiday themed cards, Starfleet Dissidents, winning inspired cards, popular characters as personnel, and battle rank with all these. And the cutoff point with multi-affiliations in early game was pretty clear. Early game was just close enough to miss getting into the middle tier. So there's two here on the bottom, and the odd thing is the data turned out differently for them, but they actually two characteristics tied for those two bottom spots. So they are Starfleet Dissidents and holiday themed cards. So yeah, I shared the spread with Richard earlier, but I'm kind of surprised that those two wound up with the same thing, with the same numbers, and all was said and done.
I'm surprised that they ended up with the same numbers as well. Um, Personally, I'd put Starfleet Dissidents higher. Um, I like in general the idea of stay off my side of the table, and then also giving the incentives to come over. I'm going to get these bonuses if you don't come over, and then be angry that oh, no, stay away. That's the push pull of that is interesting to me design wise. Um, I think it kind of gets overshadowed by one particular card, Starcross, being that it just links it so hard to one particular gloom pile, but it's pretty powerful. It has some interesting things you can do that nobody else can do. So I'm sort of surprised by that. Holiday themed cards, on the other hand, it's a mixed bag. Understandably, we're going to continue to do, I think, holiday themed cards sets, but they're always going to be a little bit of a grab bag. There's going to be a little less of a I can see a clear theme in there because they do it in a multiple different ways. So and maybe I'm absolutely wrong there. Maybe we should completely stop with the holiday theme type ideas. They don't come out very often, just every once in a while, but maybe that's something that we should look into is they don't excite people. So even though they have, I think, some interesting individual cards in there, it's hard to sort of look at the big picture and say, oh yeah, that was a great mechanic, because they don't have a unifying mechanic. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And there's if we do want to do more holiday themed cards, there's plenty more holidays to choose from. Although if we get to Arbor Day, that's going to be a little bit iffy.
We got Drought Tree, we can do that, right? And then I'm stumped. Yeah. I don't know. Picard's Christmas tree. Oh.
Yeah. All right. So going up, next we have Battle. And battle's been in the game since the very beginning.
Mhm.
It is pretty firmly entrenched in the middle tier.
I'm not surprised that it's, kind of middle tier. When we're talking about, I'm blanking on the name of the set. Sacrifice
Sacrifice
Bangos, I think?
Bangos.
Yes. When we're talking about that, there was some degenerative strategies that we saw come out of that, totally unintended, I'm sure. But we had some. I could see some people being negative about the results of that, as opposed to looking at the set as a whole and thinking, okay, what did it do for battle? Did it expand the concept of battle? Did it, add something new that we hadn't seen before? And it definitely did add some interesting strategies that you can use for battle. So I think for the most part it was successful. I understand that a couple instances might have tainted the well on that one.
Yeah, especially with battle, because there's certain affiliations that you really can't do too much to make battle better for them just because they're so good with battle already.
Right.
But overall, I am really glad with the way the set turned out, especially with some cards to help you last through a battle if you're not otherwise prepared.
Right.
So obviously the top two mechanics are cards inspired by 1E and popular characters as personnel. So the next one up are cards inspired by 1E.
This is something I don't think is going away. I mean, 1E has touched on so many different things, and not always, I would say, especially in the early days of Decipher, has the 1E side really been, focused on thematically linking cards, and it was more or less, oh, what do we see on screen? Let's make that. Let's translate what we saw on screen directly to cardboard. I think the best things the 1E does is when what it does really well right now, actually, I think, is sort of putting things in their categories and putting, I want to play Klingons, but there's many different ways to play the Klingons. You can play those past version of the Klingons who, if I remember correctly from Dogs of War, what they like to, they did a lot of equipment love, right? If I remember correctly. Sorry, I'm not a 1E player, so
It's all right.
But they had a definite theme. Like that's how you played them. You could play the honor Klingons in TNG. You could play the treachery Klingons in TNG, and they all have different, based on like their incidents, they have different, thematic things that tie them together and make them work. If we, as the 2E designers, look at 1E and think, okay, or look at something that we want to expand into. 1E is ahead of us in many ways. Sometimes in some different stories, we're ahead of 1E. We do them before they get there. But 1E's been around longer. They're going to be have been exploring different areas for a long time. If we decide to go into that area, one of the discussions we might have is, okay, how does 1E do it? Is that something that translates to 2E? Is that something we'd like to see in the game? Does anybody else do that already? Should we come up with something new for them? Should we, there's lots of discussion about that. And I think sometimes getting inspired by what 1E has done, if they do it well, what's the harm in, trying to bring some of that to second edition? So I don't have a problem with cards inspired by 1E. I'm not, I mean, Sonar are just a great example recently of some place where we definitely departed from the way that 1E interpreted Sona, and yet at the same time they got a card that kind of did what we did in mass. Well, let's make Maul Dominion. And they just did it through a card, and we did it, just as everybody gets the brown shellacking. It's like there's interesting ways of getting inspired by 1E and not necessarily following all the way through, but also sometimes a direct translation is fun too. So I don't know exactly how to answer the question of will we see more of this, except to say, if it works, yes.
Yeah, the other fun thing with cards inspired by 1E, as a designer, you can get away with a little more complex card just because players are already used to how it works in 1E. Like
Absolutely.
taking Old Enshrined card, like I know that we try not to design a wall of text, but sometimes you need more words and oh, I see this picture. I know what this card does. Yeah, there's a lot of words, but oh, I know what the card does. I remember it from 1E.
Right. And personally, I find that it's not, and I know people disagree with me on this one, but I find that it's not necessarily the number of words on a card, but the complexity of the idea on the card. I got some flack for the Klingons in All Our Yesterdays. I get that. They're big walls of text, but the idea is I do something for a discount, and you can undo that. You can do the same thing to, undo my discount. I think conceptually, it's an easy idea to wrap your mind around. You're not doing 5 different things with the card. It's not very complex. 5 lines of text. But it's similar to I forget. There is some event out there with a replicate on there that is a really long replicate, and then because the text on there has to that they chose for replicate is like describing the entire effect. It's replicate that whole long effect, and then the reminder text is that whole long effect again, and it's just like a lot of words to say. I mean, sometimes in 2E, it just takes some words to try to get across what you're trying to say. So
Yeah,
believe me, I don't want to make super long text that it takes you a while to read every time you play it, but that's something that I kind of try to juggle myself. Is that type of thing. And so when we get something inspired by 1E, can we replicate that? Sometimes it takes some text. I get that. Also, off of what you said, sometimes we can look at what 1E did and it doesn't work and think, okay, how can I fix that? What's version 2.0 and how can I make it work? And if it's a good idea, we get another bite of the apple, and that could be interesting.
yeah. And of course, that on top leaves popular characters as personnel.
Popular characters are great. We want to see the people that we love as our heroes and our villains. Of course, we're going to keep seeing those. I know the downside is, the Kira effect. Just too many versions of the character to choose one. And why can't some other character have this ability so that I can have both of those abilities out? That type of thing. On the other hand, sometimes it's beneficial. The Captain Chakotay, captain of the USS Voyager version, is the perfect character to give that text to, because if you're going to do 5 Space Voyager, then you'll make the choice of do I use the one, the Chuckles brothers, unstopping abilities, or do I go 5 Space, and maybe that's an interesting choice. So I like to look at picking a specific character when that tends to be the crux of a deck. Like that's a great character to choose for the next different version of that deck. Is now if you want to go in that direction, you have to abandon the old direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the list. The other important thing to mention is the most popular response, like the thing that most people said more than anyone else. Darn near half of everyone put cards inspired by first edition in the middle tier. By far more people agreed on that than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they can be done well or badly, so that makes sense to me.
So that was the mechanics from 2019. Probably we're going to do this every year. So around January 2022, we're going to look at the mechanics from January 2020. It always takes like a good 6 months for players to really adapt to the material. So that's why we're looking at things not from the previous year, but from the year before that. So be on the lookout for that. And also, this is a bit of a part of a somewhat larger discussion. The thing is, if we ever were going to do Battle as an expansion again, would we? And how players think of the concept is a huge part of that. It isn't the whole thing, but it is part of it. I'd like to ask how they think of a concept just as a whole, not just the way they were implemented in a specific set, but how they were overall. To me, for player feedback, it's second only to the card use data itself. And let's face it, that's been a little sporadic for the past 18 or so months.
Definitely.
You know, if there's something that everyone says this is amazing, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and no one's using it, we've got some questions. If people say this is horrible, this is the worst thing since the square wheel, but everyone's using it, we have questions. It's probably gonna be the start of another discussion. You might want to assign a different team to something that everyone likes, but no one's using. Or if there's someone everyone's using, but no one likes, that might be more of a balanced team type of thing to get taken care of. But this can be the starting point for some of those questions and discussions.
Absolutely. And we're looking kind of, I'm sure discussion of this on the boards, once we post this, will be, looking at very individual cards. We're kind of looking very generally right now between the two of us. Whenever we start a new set in design, it's very broad type of, do we, what is it that we want to accomplish out of this? Game areas can we play in, that type of thing. So that's kind of the discussion that we're having right now.
Right.
I know once you get down into the weeds, you can get to different opinions and things.
Yeah. Yeah, things definitely happen when you're doing the card by card, and I'm from acting. You do the blocking, and then you do the okay. Is my pinky up or down when I hold the cup? So there's always fine tuning that can change things down the road. But one example that I'd like to bring up is persistence. Like that's one mechanic that we tried. We put more of it out. There's a recruitment mechanic, and there's just not a whole lot that the community is doing to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just looking overall. What do you think of this mechanic? Is it top of the top, best of the best, top tier, middle tier, bottom tier, or just bottom worst of the worst? I kind of got some flack for using some terms interchangeably when the survey first came out. Concepts, themes, and mechanics, which are somewhat related. There's mechanics that are the specific thing on a card. There's a concept, what the card is trying to do, and then the overall theme. But you could expect to see this continuing going. We're going to try and do it every year just to get an additional point of feedback from players. Richard, anything else before we wrap it up?
Not off the top of my head.
Perfect. All right, so we'll wrap this up, and I'm sure if you're like me, 20 more things will come to your head as we wrap it up. But thank you to everyone who did the survey. Also, thank you to Richard for taking the